Hello everyone, good morning and thank you for joining me today. Today's daf is Bava Kamma 84 Amud B. So let's dive straight in. Just continuing from the last daf, the Gemara clarifies what is different about compensation for damage to a person caused by a person and for damage caused by to a person caused by an ox, and that is not collected in Babylonia. If you say that we require ordained judges to collect damages and there are not any ordained judges in Babylonia, then so too in the case of damage caused by an ox to an ox and damage caused by a person to an ox, say that we require ordained judges, and there are not any other judges in Babylonia. In Exodus chapters 21 to 22, where most civil laws are detailed, the judges of the court are referred to several times as Elohim. Exodus 21:6, 22:8. 22:8. The sages understood from this that only ordained judges who are called Elohim can rule in certain types of court cases. This ordination is rooted in the authority to judge that God granted to Moses, and then transferred the authority to other sages. These sages were then ordained as their students, passing on a special authority. Sages who did not receive ordination, including Talmudic sages of Babylonia and all sages from then until this day, do not have this authority, even if they are great scholars. They may rule only in limited types of court cases. Rather, what is different about damage to an ox caused by an ox and damage to an ox caused by a man? So the Babylonian judges can rule in these cases even though they are not ordained. The difference is that we, the judges of Babylonia, perform the agency of judges of Eretz Yisrael. In other words, just as one can authorize his agent to act on his behalf, the ordained judges of Eretz Yisrael authorize non-ordained judges to rule in certain cases. Based on this, contemporary judges may assess damage, medical costs, and loss of livelihood. They may collect the principal of a stolen item from a thief, and they may rule in cases of bailies, indirect damage, slander, among others. Rabbi Hananel. Sherichot son Yehu ka Avdinan. Contemporary rabbinic courts may not assess penalties. They may judge only cases that involve monetary loss. These include cases concerning admissions and loans, marriage contracts, inheritances, one who damages another's property, theft and robbery, indirect damage, and those who inform on duty to the Gentile authorities, and conspiring witnesses. Cases that are uncommon, even if they involve a monetary loss, usually that of an animal that injures another animal or person, are also not judged in modern times. Payments that are not compensation for monetary loss, e.g. double payment for theft, or compensation for humiliation, are also not assessed by courts today. Although the courts do not assess penalties, it nevertheless has the authority to excommunicate the guilty party until they appease the opposing litigant. The Rama writes that these limitations apply only to penalties mandated by Torah law. These courts may assess penalties that sages institute on the behalf of society. I'm going to say for sure, from Hilchot Sanhedrin 5:9, Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mitzvot 1:1-5. Just we do with regard to halacha of admissions and loans. Admissions are those cases in which one admits to a debt owed to another. Rashi, the first Mishnah of Tractate Sanhedrin, states that even non-ordained judges can rule in these cases. The ordained judges granted them the authority to do so to ensure a proper function of society, since if it were difficult to find a court to resolve such disputes, people would refrain from lending money. As an extension of this authority, rabbinic courts may rule with regard to any matters that serve a public need, even in the present, as we are permitted to rule in those cases as agents of the ordained judges in Eretz Yisrael. If so, then in cases of damage caused by a person to a person by a person, the Gemara in Tractate Sanhedrin 2b teaches that cases of theft and injury require 3 ordained judges, unlike cases of admissions and loans, which may be ruled by non-ordained judges. Therefore, ask, are there many instances in the Gemara in which the courts judge cases of theft? There are several answers. Some say that those were cases where one whose item was stolen seized property from the thief, or when two parties travel to Eretz Yisrael to present the case before ordained judges. Others say that common cases of theft may be judged by non-ordained judges, and that only cases of theft that involve physical injury must be judged by ordained judges. Other commentaries explain that if the two parties voluntarily accept the authority of the judges of their area, then that court may rule in a wider range of cases. The Ramban writes that in the present, when there are no ordained judges, courts are considered as agents of the original ordained judges, and consequently have the authority to rule on any matter that benefits society. Because the court assesses compensation for an injury based on the injured party's value as a slave, the Babylonian courts did not have the authority to conduct this appraisal. Contemporary rabbinic courts may not rule in case of personal injury. Additionally, today's courts do not have the authority to assess compensation for pain and humiliation. By contrast, medical costs are loss of livelihood or monetary losses, so courts today may assess compensation for them. The Ramah, citing the Rosh, maintains that medical costs and loss of livelihood are also not assessed in modern times. Despite this, the custom is that rabbinic courts force anyone who causes damage to another to appease the injured party, under threat of excommunication. The judges set the amount of compensation as they see fit. Ramah Sefer Shevitim Hilchot Sanhedrin 5:10, 17 Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat 1:2-5. In cases of damage caused by a person to an ox as well, why not say that the judge of Babylon performed the agency of the judge of Eretz Yisrael, just as with regard to the halakha of admissions and loans? The sages state with regard to the distinction: when we, the judge of Babylon, perform the agency of the judge of Eretz Yisrael, we do so in matters where the ruling is clear to us. Since the principles of civil law are well known, the courts of Babylon need only execute the judgment, not determine the halakha. They are considered to be agents of the court in Eretz Yisrael, fulfilling the instructions of the ordained judges. In the case of an injury to a person, which requires an appraisal, we do not perform the agency of the judges of Eretz Yisrael. The sages state an objection. In case of damage caused to an ox by an ox, and damage caused to an ox by a man, cases that we do judge in Babylonia, the ruling is not clear to us, as the damage must be appraised. Rather, how is the judgment assessed in those cases? We say, go out and see how much an ox is sold in the marketplace, and thereby assess the value of the damages without a detailed appraisal. If so, in the case of damage caused to a person by a person and damage caused to a person by an ox, say too, go out and see how a slave is sold in the slave market. Why then are these latter cases not judged in Babylonia? Furthermore, in the case of payment of double, the principle occurred by a thief, and in the case of a fourfold or fivefold payment incurred by a thief who stole a sheep or ox, and then slaughtered or sold the animal, where the payments are fixed and there is no need for an appraisal, we should perform the agency of the judges of Eretz Yisrael. The sages state with regard to the distinction: when we perform the agency of the judges of Eretz Yisrael, we do so only in cases where the guilty party pays monetary restitution for a loss he caused. In case of a penalty such as the double, fourfold or fivefold payment to a thief, we do not perform the agency of the judges of Eretz Yisrael. The penalty is a fixed obligation imposed by one who caused damage beyond the cost of the actual damage. This is not an ordinance for the sake of maintaining a civil society, but rather a court-mandated punishment for a sin. These punishments are outside the jurisdiction of non-ordained judges. Likewise, they may not administer physical punishments for criminal offences. The agency of judges of Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara asks, in case of damage caused to a person by a person, where the liable party pays monetary restitution, should we perform the agency of the judge of Eretz Yisrael? The Gemara answers, when we perform the agency of the judge of Eretz Yisrael, we do so only in cases that are common. Therefore, in case of damage caused to a person by a person, cases that are uncommon, we not perform the agency of the judges of Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara challenges, but accordingly, for indemnities paid to a woman for humiliation and degradation, a man who rapes an unmarried girl who is between 3 and 12.5 years of age is obligated by Torah to marry her, if she and her father so desire, and he may not divorce her without her consent. He is also required to pay a fine for the rape and to pay damages according to the halachot of personal injury, Deuteronomy 22:29. The sum of the payment for humiliation is evaluated according to the social standing of both the person who suffered the humiliation and the one who caused it. Payment is required for humiliation even if no physical injury was inflicted. The requirement for this payment is based on the verse Deuteronomy 25:11, which establishes payment for humiliation when there is no damage. An additional category of reimbursement that a man must pay if he seduces or rapes a girl is degradation. This is appraised according to the reduction in the girl's value caused by the loss of her virginity if she were to be sold as a Hebrew maidservant. After being raped or seduced, a case that is common, Smart explains that although rape was certainly not common, the fact that no assessment is required to determine the amount of compensation, as the amount is stated clearly in the verse Deuteronomy 22:29, renders compensation for humiliation, degradation in the case of rape as equivalent to a common matter with regard to the issue of whether non-ordained judges can issue a ruling concerning it. We should perform the agency of the judges of Eretz Yisrael. The sages say in response, indeed, do we collect compensation for humiliation and degradation in Babylonia, as Rav Papa collected 400 dinars as compensation for humiliation when he judged these cases? The Gemara questions this explanation, but the other sages did not agree with that ruling of Rav Papa, as Rav Chisda sent this question to Rav Nachman, asking if he should collect compensation for humiliation and degradation, and Rav Nachman sent him the following reply: Chisda, do you collect the penalty in Babylonia? Rather explain the distinction this way: if we perform the agency of the judges of Eretz Yisrael, we do so only in a matter that is common and involves, i.e., the payment is for a monetary loss. When in a matter that is common but does not involve a monetary loss, or in an uncommon matter which does involve a monetary loss, we do not perform the agency of the judge of Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, in a case of an injury caused to a person by a person, even though it involves a monetary loss, since it is uncommon, we do not perform the agency of the judge of Eretz Yisrael. In the case of humiliation, even though it is common, since it does not involve a monetary loss, we do not perform the agency of the judge of Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara challenges the halach itself. But is it in fact the case that the court of Babylonia collect restitution for damage caused to an ox by an ox? Or doesn't it rather say, if an ox caused damage, the court of Babylonia did not collect the compensation? And clarify, to whom did the ox cause damage? If we say that it damaged a person, why did Rava specifically state his halacha in a case where there is an ox that damaged a person? Even in the case of a person who damaged a person, which is more common, the court does not collect the compensation of Babylonia. Rather, it is obvious Rava meant that the ox damaged an ox. And Rava teaches the court does not collect compensation in Babylonia. The sages say in response, there Rava stated his ruling with regard to an innocuous ox, i.e. an ox that was not forewarned, whose owner pays for the damage as a penalty, and penalty is not collected in Babylonia. Here Rava states his ruling with regard to a forewarned ox, and payment for damage it causes is not a penalty, but rather serves as a compensation. The Gemara challenges, but doesn't Rava say there are no forewarned oxes in Babylonia, as an ox can be forewarned only by ordained judges? The sages say in response, this is a case where an ox was forewarned there in Eretz Yisrael, and then its owners brought it here to Babylonia. The Gemara objects, but this is an uncommon matter, as forewarned oxen are not frequently transported from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia. With regard to an uncommon matter, did you not say that we perform the agency of the judges of Eretz Yisrael? The Gemara answers, this is a case where the rabbis from there, i.e. Eretz Yisrael, who are ordained, came and declared this ox forewarned here, i.e. in Babylonia. The Gemara challenges the interpretation. Ultimately, this is an uncommon matter, and you say with regard to an uncommon matter that we do not perform the agency of the judges of Eretz Yisrael. I'll explain that when Rava says that the court in Babylonia collected restitution for damage caused by an ox, he means with regard to a damage in the categories of eating and trampling. The halacha of forewarned ox is not practiced today, and therefore the owner of an animal that caused damage in the category of goring is not held liable. The owner of an animal that caused damage in the category of eating and trampling, both of which are common types of damage for which the animal is considered forewarned from the outset, is held liable in the present day. The Shech writes in the Marashal writes that one who caused damage in the category of fire or pit is also held liable nowadays. Rama Sefer Shovtim Hilchos and Hedron 5:11, Choshen Mishpat 1:3, which are forewarned from the outset. Eating and trampling are categories of damage that are caused by an animal engaging in its typical behavior, The Mishnah establishes early in this tractate on 17a and 19b that an animal is always considered forewarned with regard to these categories of damage. All agree that since these are common forms of damage and involve monetary loss, the judges of Babylonia perform the agency of the judges of Eretz Yisrael and collect compensation for the damage. The Gemara returns to its discussion of the Mishnah, which states, how is payment for pain assessed? If one burned another with a skewer or with a hot nail, or even if he burned him on his fingernail, where he would not cause a bruise that would affect the victim's value on the slave market, the court evaluates how much money a person with a similar threshold for pain as the victim is willing to take in order to be made to suffer in this way. The moral comments, this teaches that even when pain is not in a place that causes damage to the injured party, the one who caused the injury must pay compensation. The Gemara asks, who is the Tana who taught the statement? Rava said, this is the opinion of Ben Azai, as is taught in a Braita with regard to the verse, Kavir for Kavir, a wound for a wound, Habura for Habura. Exodus 21:25. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, a burn Kavir is the first term stated in the verse, and Ben Azai say, a bruised Habura is the first term stated in the verse. The Gemara explains the Braita. Ben Azai certainly agrees with the first term in the verse, Kavir means a burn. With regard to what do they disagree, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds that Kavir indicates an injury with no bruise, and that one would be liable to pay for injuring another even in that manner. Therefore, when the merciful one writes in the Torah Habura, it is to reveal about the meaning of Kavir, that if also the burn also has a bruise, then yes, the one who caused the injury must pay compensation for pain. But if the burn has no bruise, then no, the one who caused the injury does not pay compensation for pain alone. And Ben Azai holds that Kavir indicates a burn that also has a bruise, and that one would be liable to pay for injuring another only in that manner. Therefore, when the merciful one writes in the Torah Habura, is to reveal the meaning of Kavir, that even if it is a burn with no bruise, the one who caused the injury must pay compensation for pain alone, even though there is no damage. Rav Papa objects to Rava's explanation of the Braita. On the contrary, the opposite stands to reason. As Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, a burn Kavir is the first term stated in the verse, since he holds that Kavir indicates a burn that also has a bruise, and won't be liable to pay for injuring another only in that manner. Therefore, when Mertzman writes in the Torah Habura, is to reveal about the meaning of Kavir, that even if it is a burn with no bruise, the one who caused the injury must pay compensation for pain alone, even though there is no damage. Rav Papa continues, and Ben Azai says that a bruised Habura is the first term stated in the verse. He holds that Kavir indicates that an injury with no bruise, and that one would be liable to pay for injuring another even in that manner. Therefore, when the merciful one writes in Torah Habura, it's to reveal about the meaning of Kavir, that if the burn also has a bruise, then yes, the one who caused the injury must pay compensation for pain, but if the burn has no bruise, then no, the one who caused the injury does not pay compensation for pain alone. And according to the explanation, the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and Ben Azai with regard to the meaning of the terms of the verse are based on the final understanding of the verse. The term the verse stated is referring to the understanding of the first term after the second term has been written, not what the understanding of the first term would have been if not for the addition of the second term. According to the explanation of Rav Papa, the Mishnah here is according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. The Gemara offers another explanation of the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Hanasi ben Azai. Alternatively, everyone agrees that Kavir indicates an injury whether there is a bruise or whether there is not a bruise. And here, just start the first sentence and the next onward. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and Ben Azai disagree over whether the hermeneutical principle of generalization and detail is applied with regard to generalization and detail that are distance from each other. Thank you for listening. I wish you a very good day and week. Bye.